Hi, I'm Jeremy, and this is going to be a quick video on learning how to fix a flat bike tire. We're going to go over how to gather the tools, repair parts pre-checks, repairs post-checks. Let's go ahead and get started. So we've got a flat tire, and the problem, the nuts are softer than the bike wrenches that we got, so that's no good. So the first thing in doing a job is making sure you've got the right tools. Got some tools that we'll use here to get the tire off and the tube out. The right size tubes, and we had to order some of these socket, and then making sure that you have the right size stuff. Read on the tire, it'll have exactly what the tire size is, and so that's what we got. Like 35 to 40 is where this one falls. I think this one's like a 38, like right in the middle. A hand pump, and so the only thing that I'd be worried about with this job that I may go find is a pressure gauge, because again, we don't want to over tighten things, and we don't want to over or under inflate things, and we don't want to under tighten things. So just making sure we have all the right tools to do a quality job, so that way after we fix the bike, it stays fixed for the longest amount of time possible. So this is a Sunlight 700 by 35 to 34, 27 by 1 3/8 tube. So that means, and we just want to open this and take a look and make sure we don't see visually any defects. The easiest thing to go look at is the valve stem. Ensure that it all looks good. The most economic tire that's sold on Amazon. This is a Kenda 7 maximum recommended inflation pressure of 50 to 75 psi. So that's the important piece of information. So we figured out the socket that fits is 5/8. You want to make sure that on this socket wrench, when you're loosening, it's turned to the left. When you're tightening, it's turned to the right. And look at that, no problem. Again, on this side, this was the one that really gave us problems, and boom, you can even hear that it broke. And that means when you have a weld of metal against metal, you'll hear an actual snap. You don't have to completely take these off because the washers and keeping them on there and things like that, you don't want to lose them. You may want to have work gloves on, because again, with these back tires, with the geared bikes, you have to mess with the chain, and you just got to be careful, and you got to handle the chain well, because the chain actually, like, you want to derail the chain off of this gear hub. So we're going to remove the chain off of the back wheel. So we lift this up, take the chain off the teeth of this wheel, and you can just pull it out. And on the bottom, same deal, just push it down, and now you pretty much just have to pull it out of here, so that way you have clearance right there. You got the wheel out, and so the next step will be removing the tire and the tube. So here we have the flat tire. To make it easy for it to come off, you always want to make sure that it's fully deflated. We use the best practice are these plastic tools, because they will not mess up the rim, and they will not puncture the tire or the tubes. These are great little tools. They just kind of go in, and you should be able to just go in and pry under the lip. And bring it over like so. And we want to, because this is the tube, the tire, we should be able to deal with the tire independent of the tube at this moment. Pull this along. There we go. And so then, after you get over that initial friction, and the tension goes pretty quick for the one side. And then once half of it is off, You can go back to where that valve comes in, that valve stem, and you can actually get in here now and remove the tire. So that's how I do it. And then I come over to here where the valve stem gets into the wheel, and I push up, pull, and pry, and then you can just pull that tube right out into the tire tube. If it was just the tube, if we knew like, oh, I just overinflated it and then I started losing pressure or something like that, you could just put in the new tube at this point, just reversing the process. The usually the second side is easier to get off. So again, we'll just get one little piece of this pried over the lip, and it comes boom right off. It's just easier and safer to assume that there's an issue and replacing it with the good part. So the next thing that we do is to get this tire onto this wheel. We're gonna again kind of just start hand fitting it around just one side of the lip, and we'll get to a point where it'll have to stretch over it, and again we'll use the tool to do that. And so kind of get to that point, and then I'll just take again this tool and have it go around really quick. And so there, I've got it to where it's just seated on one side of the tire. I will take the new tube, I'm gonna remove the valve cap, I'm gonna find the hole in the wheel where the valve stem comes through. Here we go, right here. I'm gonna push that valve stem through that point. And at this point, it's getting in there fine. You gotta like get this wheel over it to tuck it in fully. So there we go. At this point, what you gotta watch out for is just making sure that you don't twist and braid the tire as or the tube rather, as you feed it into the tire. You want this tube seated into this tire like a belt, and that the belt isn't twisted at any point. So again, we're just gonna work our way around. I'm just pushing it all the way against the spine of the tire, making sure that it's seated flat. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I'm feeling like grease and things coming off the wheel. That's not a problem. Making sure that you've got like the shop cleanup things, like having a towel or a rag you don't mind messing up. Okay, so we've gotten all the way around. It's seated properly. We take this tool now, and again, you kind of want to get this started by where the valve stem is, and you get it over the lip. So this is the second part of the tire that wasn't over the lip. I use this tool at this angle now, so reversing the angle from the first time. Here's the hook. I just sneak it in there, and I should be able to just, again, push in. I can do this by hand initially, but there will be a point where the tire is begging to be stretched, and hand pressure may need to be assisted with the tool. So I'm just pinching it over. Again, so here's an example. It's the tire coming over is pinching this tube. So what do I do when this happens? I go further down, and I'm gonna push this tube in there and make sure that it's, again, fed in correctly and flat. And make sure that that tube's all the way over. Make sure the tube is seated all the way around, flat on the inside. And so we were able to get all the way around right here at the end. It's probably gonna need a little assistance from, there you go. So the next part is re-inflating the tube and tire. I'll start by just using hand pressure, but I'm gonna go find my PSI gauge that works with this Schrader stem, and the Schrader stem is the one that has the screw cap on with the valve stem that's inside of the enclosure here. So you just want to make sure that the pump that you're going to use is for this type of stem. So again, I'm just eyeballing this, making sure I don't see any, I guess they would be like hemorrhages of tube, and making sure that the lip of the tire is seated on the wheel. So this is a PSI gauge. People use these for their cars, for their bikes. The back side is to put against the nozzle to deflate, and then this is the side that you put on there when you want to measure it, and there's a little dipstick that flies out the bottom and it reads the pounds per square inch. To get a good seat on this, because it's flat, it's gonna have play to put pressure in from the tire, and so pull on it just a little just to make sure you got a good seat, and we start blowing it in there. Every pump is a little bit different. Each pump is going to put like a different amount of air in there, so I'm not going to say like, you know, CPR this number of pumps to this number of checks, but you do a certain number of pumps and you do check. And again, we're just going along. An issue that sometimes happens is, and I can see that it's even happening here, a new tire and kind of like new tube and all that, either the stem isn't seated perpendicular to the wheel, so it's at a slant this way or that way, and in that case, if it's bad and you've already like kind of like pinched it or kinked it, you would deflate the tube and you would rotate the tire in two to make sure that that stem is perpendicular. So again, just kind of giving it good hard pinches. It should respond to where the squeeze, you don't feel any bulges or anything like that, and it should feel consistent all the way around the tire.
I think that more often you do this, and hopefully you don't have to do this often, you can eyeball things and just kind of like really quickly know if it's going well or not. So bike tires, they feel pretty firm when they're inflated. So they usually have a little ways to go. When you give it the pinch, there shouldn't be that much give. So again, because these things are going to hold, you know, adult size weight, and so we'll give it a check to see where we're at.
And that is just over 15 PSI.
Maybe a rule of thumb. I get a pound per square inch for each pump. So maybe I've got like 50 pumps I got to do on this thing. I'm taking it down. Again, you do a certain amount of compressions when there's a noticeable change in the responsiveness of the tire. It feels harder. Go ahead and give it another check. Just check your progress, check your rate of change. So to zero that thing, that's all you do, is you want it to be zeroed out when you go to check the pressure again. And again, you just put it up in there. Boom. Okay, so that time we got a readout of just like right at like 25. And it only goes to 50. So again, like I'm going to pretty much want this stick to know when I'm crossing the threshold between like 45 and 50, because after that, I am not going to have an indicator of going any further above that. So. So I want to check this. If like, let's say I check it and it's just like boom, pegged out at 50. I will actually deflate it and try to get that reading, you know, in the high 40s, and then just do the handful of pumps over that. Be like, okay, I know I'm in, you know, that 50 to 75 range, but my pressure gauge only reads up to 50. The danger again is, what if I pump it up to 75 or 80 or 90? I'm gonna have no idea. And my partner will be riding this bike, and she will be the one that finds out. And it goes flat on the big one. 35, making progress. And a little, like, aiming over where you want to end up is okay, because you probably just heard when you couple a valve stem with a pump or take it off, there is a temporary opening of the valve stem and it releases air. So that's what you want to move quick, because you can lose air.
And then not have the desired pressure. So here we go. This is a hemorrhage. So this is, the tire is hemorrhaging. It's not fully over the seal. So hey, what do I do? So I'm gonna take this off. I'm gonna go ahead and deflate this tube. I'm gonna take, what it was is that the tire wasn't perfectly seated onto this tube. You know, no real big deal. There. Try to make sure that that tube and the tire are all seated hunky-dory, nested in each other. Okay, that's it. We'll start again.
Someone relying on your job to have some component fail unexpectedly while the person's using the thing that you fixed, and it be your fault. Because as the mechanic or the person maintaining the component, you are responsible for the safety based on the operation of that component. When that component fails while it's operating, that's a failure on preventative maintenance, checks and services. So, what do I mean by that? That means hey, every time you ride your bike, you're checking your tires, checking the pressure, checking the bolts, making sure things are good to go, tightening in the right way, not too much, not too little, just right. Checking for the hemorrhages and stuff like that. Do the same thing with the car, check things, normal checks, because we have leading indicators of problems. Low PSI, low levels of something that has a threshold and objective measure. PSI is what we use for tires. Now, hey, why did it hemorrhage? Why did it bulge like that and things? It's looking fine. We're building the pressure back up. When you get new tires and tubes, especially the new tires, when they get shipped and transferred and things like that, they're going to be a little bit misshapen. Like the lips and things are kind of wavy and all that. And so it's kind of just blowing up the balloon and letting everything seat and bend the way it needs to, and then finding
Out like okay, and then reseating it, and then everything should be fine. So it's a process. 25, 26, 27.
Some people think that, hey, I'll just pump this thing until it's hard to pump, and I'll know it's full. You don't want to do that. And for all these reasons we're talking about. We use measures to make sure that things are maintained within their specifications. If we do that, they should last an expected amount of life. And so for tubes and tires, it is a function of how often you ride it, how far you ride it, because again, wear and tear, right? Nothing lasts forever. As we use things, they get worn. As we use things, they get torn. And we make them in such a way to where we get minor wear and tear that tells us it's time to change this thing. The tread on the tire. So you look at the tread on the tire, that's what gives you traction. And then what traction? Because that allows you to safely navigate.
Bike, right? Ooh. There we got 35. We're getting there.
You lose all the tread on your tire. Get a new tire. You lose all the tread on your running shoes. You're going to get new running shoes. What happens if you don't? Hey, they work, right? Well, they don't work well. You'll slip, you'll fall, you'll crash. Because the world's a slippery place. And rubber helps because it's sticky, but the tread is what helps us get traction. Because it allows air, water, and debris to move and create that surface area that gives us good traction. What you don't want is objects like water, leaves, things like that on the ground to create like that barrier where there's a lot of pressure, because then it becomes a very slippery surface. Tire smooth, the surface is smooth, high pressure, you lose traction, friction coefficient, so it'll slip, and when you get slippage and you lose traction, the bike can do things like fall out from underneath you.
So we're really close. So ideally, I'm gonna pump this. It'll as you pump, it gets harder to pump. Like, how do you know when you're done? Again, that PSI gauge is telling us. I want to get to like the high 40s there. Do a handful of pumps, knowing that it puts me over 50. And then I'm in that threshold.
And
46.
the tire's looking good. Tire and tube are looking good. No hemorrhages. Yeah, everything is looking like seated well. 360 degrees both sides. It is becoming, again, like the back pressure. The tire pushes back. Anytime you push something, pushes back. Equal force, right? I put 10 pounds of pressure into there, pushes back 10 pounds. I gotta overcome it with more pressure.
Becoming a little bit more precise and agile with those changes, because I want to preserve as much of the air in the tire as possible for that final like valve exchange. Okay, so there we are. We're at 48. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna do like one more series of pumps. Where people get into trouble are those foot pumps. They're super convenient and super easy, and the good ones have a PSI gauge in line. And that's not just a convenience, that's because your foot, and you're putting all your weight in it, you will overinflate it if you didn't have feedback of where you were at real quickly. So those things can go up 150, 200, 250 PSI. They're made for all sorts of stuff. So, final exchange. Good. Valve cap on. Make sure that it's seated and twisted. And we just hand tighten. Never over tighten. Hand tighten just means you tighten it with your hand, and when it stops using normal pressure, you stop turning it. So the next step would be reapplying this wheel to the rear, into the rear fork of the bike, reseating the bike chain. And so with these multi-gear bikes, the bike will, like, that's one of those things, oh, which gear, how do I know which thing in the setting? It's not that important. Like, it's just, it's important to make sure that the chain isn't kinked, that it is aligned to a gear. While it's still flipped over, you will pedal the bike, and based on the setting that the gears are on, once you get it onto the teeth, the levers with the gears will put it back onto whatever the setting is as it reseats itself. So the bikes are made kind of self-correct after you get the chain on, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Pretty easy. Make sure that the gears are on when the bike is flipped over on the left side if you're facing the front of the bike. So on the side that the chain is on. Okay? The chain, you should be able to tell, still has a top and a bottom. We're gonna lift this chain and we're gonna put that hub assembly between the top and bottom of that bike chain. And at this point, you can just let it sit down. Lift this back lever of where the chain is, this gear thing, and the hub assembly will just rotate down. And we're gonna push that down into there to make sure that it's seated into the fork where the two bolts go. And where I'm actually feeling resistance, and something to think about, is the brakes. Now that I have an inflated tire, and I'm just realizing this, you fully inflate the tire after it's on the bike, so that way it can make it through those brakes. Okay, so got the tire, pushed it through there. What you'll notice, the wheel stops. And so in pushing through those brakes, and this is again common, they're misaligned. So the brakes in their natural position make contact with the wheel. Now what I'm gonna make sure is that the wheel is seated, that it is straight. So I'm checking to make sure that there isn't wobble. So as you watch, that's fine. And then we're just gonna do some righty-tighty, right? A little bit of tightening on this side, a little bit of tightening on this side. Snugging. So snugging again is hand tightening till it stops. And that's tight enough. That will not come loose and the wheel will not fly off while it's under operation. And again, that's maybe like, depending on how much you ride the bike, you know, you take your tool and you check to make sure that those nuts are hand tight. So again, just snugged in like that. If you over tighten it, you'll have the problem that we had where our tools, just based on how tight these things were, like welded in, that, you know, we actually were cutting into the nut versus moving it and opening it. So all I have left to do, you know, and again, like the gears, like we just made sure that the chain was seated on the gears, and then we just rotate this pedal just like this, and the gears will just go back into whatever the setting is for the gears up there at the handlebar. So again, you see that the tire is stopping on its own because we have to readjust the brake calipers and make sure that they're aligned to where in a natural position, so no pressing of the brake handle over there, that the wheel is able to spin freely without contact with the brakes, and that when we push the brake handle, that it makes contact, squeezes that, and stops it. That is the normal operation of the handbrake with the rear fork and wheel assembly. So I just went back and used an Allen wrench to loosened those brakes, hand fitted them to where they were in that right position, and then I just retightened them. I made sure that the bike was in really good working order, and then again, so what we just went over was gathering tools, repair parts, pre-checks, repairs. Again, we made sure that the bike operated as it did or should at the end, and that completed the post check. So that's how you fix a flat bike tire. Thanks for watching.